Today is an episode of Compare and Contrast. First off, let's take a look at some of my own thoughts and conspiracy theories that some might claim would make me mentally ill. And then we'll take a look at a man who I think might be mentally ill. Hopefully not. But the alternative may be far more terrifying. What happens when you take a man and have him board an alien spacecraft? This dude believes he now has the power to become your favorite television characters. Today on Dead Rapper Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you guys are having a great day too. I hope you guys are having tons of fun doing whatever you're doing. I hope you guys have some fun plans for the weekend. I might go see the re-release of The Phantom Menace, Star Wars Episode 1, because there's not much else for me to do. No, that's not true. I have a bunch of work for the podcast to do, but it's back out of the theaters, and I remember seeing it opening night, and I was pretty disappointed. Honestly, I was pretty disappointed, but it was fun nonetheless. I might relive that. I also am going to probably check out that movie Tarot, starring Ned from Spider-Man No Way Home. I don't know the actor's name, but he's Ned. I'll probably check that out too. It looks kind of goofy. I like this type of horror movies. Nothing like a big screen horror movie to watch. But someone who loves all horror, big screen and small, walking into Dead Rabbit Radio Command. Everyone get on your feet and give it up for Mokushi. Woohoo, yeah, wee! Haha, Mokushi is going to do a jump scare. Jump out at the end of this episode and spook ya. Mokushi is one of our legacy Patreon supporters. Mokushi, thanks so much for supporting the show. You're going to be our captain, our pilot this episode. If you guys can't support the show financially through the Patreon, I totally understand, I really do. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. Mokushi, let's go ahead and get this party started. I'm going to go ahead and toss you the keys to the Dead Rabbit Dune Buggy. Let's leave behind Dead Rabbit Radio Command. Why don't you drive us all the way out to the realm of the dead? Ding, 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 ding. A long time ago, I did a segment on the show called Jason's Thinkins. I think I did it once. I go, this is going to be a recurring segment, guys. And then a couple times I was like, well, these aren't as interesting as I thought they would be. Technically, it was stuff that popped in my head while I was researching stuff or, recording an episode. I go, wow, that's really cool, Jason. You came up with a really good idea. I'm like, thanks, other Jason, in my brain. Well, we're going back to that segment. This might be the last one, because if this one is not entertaining, then it's never coming back. I will say, in the meantime, I came up with this segment back in 2022. It's been a while that I only did once. I'm looking at my notes here for Jason Thinkins, because I was thinking some stuff. Here's some of the notes. One of them says, Lone Wolf Love. Do you have any idea what that means? Because I don't. Apparently I was thinking it. Apparently I thought it was so profound that I wrote it down. Lone Wolf Love. I know Lone Wolf is that book series by Joe Denver. It's like the Choose Your Own Adventure meets D&D. I love those books, and they're all available for free on the App Store. Because the Joe Denver said, yeah, go nuts. The books fell out of print. You're stopping this podcast. You're going, you remember those books? I love those books. Lone Wolf, and then what was the other one? A Gray Star? Anyways, fantastic book series, very aggravating. They're not as easy as you remember as a kid, and the apps take care of all the inventory and the dice rolls and all that stuff for you. But Lone Wolf Love, I have no idea what that means. I would assume, when I think of the term Lone Wolf, I think of, yes, the book series by Joe Denver, but I also think of terrorists. So maybe I was thinking something about, that, right? You're like, Jason, it's your list. It's your thinkings. I don't know. The other thing I wrote on here was, this isn't just the review of notes from 2 years ago. I'm building to something. I wrote on here, fantasy. I thought this might actually be a good idea. You're like, maybe, but probably not a good thing to talk about. It's kind of boring, Jason. You know how we have fantasy football and fantasy basketball and fantasy hockey or whatever other sports. Fantasy boxing? People do that? They're like, oh, I bet Mike Tyson's going to kill Logan Paul or John Paul or whoever he's fighting. John Logan. I've already forgotten. But it's probably not fantasy boxing because it doesn't happen as often. I don't know. There might be, though. Fantasy stuff. I said, you know what they should do? Think about it. We got fantasy football and all that stuff makes a ton of money. People go on these websites and they have these ads and they sell your personal information, all that stuff. They should set up fantasy. So it's like fantasy football for made up stuff. Like superhero movies. So I would assemble a team. I would assemble a fantasy team of like Spider-Man and like, I don't know, Darkwing Duck. Like you couldn't have all the biggies. You have to do like a draft. Eventually someone's going to get stuck with She-Hulk. Like you have this list and like you're going around with your friends and then you go to the movies with your friends and you see like, you're like, every time Spider-Man webs someone up, you get a point. Every time She-Hulk pushes someone off of a building, you get a point. It's just like fantasy football, and whatever like hero saves the day the most, who like webs up Thanos and goes, "That's enough of you, purple boy," then they get more points. It's just like fantasy football, but for stuff that's made up. I think it's not a terrible idea. Maybe not my best, though. Maybe not my best. You're like, oh, we've assembled our characters. We all have our points. Now let's read the 10 Dune books to see who wins what. You're like all bored. Like, oh, man. I got this big worm guy. Worm with a human head. So anyways, I think it could. I think somebody, that idea I'm giving out to you. I'm giving that out to you. I'm giving it out to Universe. Because I actually think someone could run with that and make some money. Not a lot, maybe a couple bucks. Fantasy. But then, I was thinking, as I delete these from this list, I did come up with some interesting ones. Some of them are pretty recent. That's why I kind of wanted to do this today. We have talked about, can ghosts talk to each other? This is a pretty recent episode. If two ghosts from two separate deaths are haunting the same building, can they talk to each other? And kind of the answer we came to was maybe, like it's possible. This particular story we covered on the show, there were voices recorded between a staff member and a child. Both of their ghosts were here, and they think the staff member was a principal who had died, and the boy was a boy who died like he was riding his bike down the road and got hit. And that both of those stories are true. That was one of those awesome ghost stories you find on Shadowlands.net. You dig and you dig and you dig and you find the names of the people who actually died, rather than just some couple sentences on a haunted website. You can actually really kind of get. That's one of the things I love the most about the show, is kind of proving the historical elements of some of this stuff. I started thinking, forget the staff member and the kid, because otherwise this question is going to be super gross. The other day I was reading a bunch of Shadowlands.net stuff. I go through every state. I'm trying to build this just database of stuff that I want to talk about. And there's a lot of haunted schools. And most haunted schools have multiple ghosts, which would make sense because you just have a huge student body. They're moving in and out. They've been around for decades. I came across a high school. There was such a generic story. I couldn't even tell you what state it was in. I couldn't even tell you the details of the story, but it was talking about this school that was haunted, and it was like, there's like some guy who died, like he had an asthma attack or something in the basketball court, and every so often now you can see him looking out through the band room. Like the band room overlooks the gymnasium, and there's like a window you can look out. Every so often, if you're playing basketball late at night because they're having some late game or some youth activity or whatever, you can look up and you can see the dude. You can see this high school student looking out through that window, watching you play basketball. It's creepy, right? And then the other story, that same high school, it was like a cheerleader had died. Tragic car accident or something like that, and her ghost was haunting this school. Generic. I mean, listen, if those are your kids who died, if you're in that school right now and you're being pursued by these phantasms, it is 100% the most interesting story in your life. But when you're just reading, looking for great content, you're just blown through all this stuff. But then when I read this one, a thought popped in my head. Ghosts, we do think, can talk to each other if they died at separate events. If a family dies together, it would kind of make sense they'd be able to communicate in this afterlife. But if two people die from two separate events, they're haunting the same place, would they be able to talk? I started to think when I was reading the story, can ghosts have sex with each other? Now think about it for a second. That thought popped in my head, and I was like, Jason Thinkins is coming back. Thought popped in my head, and it's funny because you instantly kind of want to dismiss it. But I mean, I'm not going to go into too much. I mean, that's basically that Thinkins. I got another one too, but we know, or we believe, that ghosts can have sex with humans because we have reports of that. Ghosts can definitely sexually violate humans. There are stories of people being sexually assaulted by ghosts, raped by ghosts, and they can also have consensual relationships with ghosts. Can ghosts have sex with each other? This dude is hanging out at this high school. This guy's a student. The cheerleader's a student. You know, they're just same age. I don't care. I mean, I guess one died in the 80s and one died in the 50s or whatever. I guess there is a 30-year age difference. But they're spectral. They're ghost people. Could they bang? Super weird to think about. Like, again, when that thought popped in my head, I kind of chuckled. And then I imagined all of the horrifying implications of that. Because if we assume that ghosts can have sex with humans, then ghosts can have sex. If you take those stories of consensual ghost sex and non-consensual ghost sex, rape, sexual assault, stuff like that, then we say then ghosts can have sex. The question here is, can they have sex with each other? Why or why not? Because my gut instinct wants to say no, but I know that's not true. I want the answer to be no. It's weird. A lot of times we look at ghosts as almost neutered. Like they're just this thing that's kind of frozen in time, and while they may have their own emotions, we don't really give them a lot of agency. I mean, but when you think about, like, the ghost of this guy up in the band room looking down at the court, the basketball court, you go, oh, that's a phantom of this kid who died, and he'll be up there for a couple minutes. We'll look back, he'll be gone. You don't then imagine him walking into the darkness and being like, I'm so bored, and then start masturbating. Right? I'm like, wow, I didn't need that image, Slimer. Slimer's watching porn. He's like, this is better than hot dogs. If a ghost can have sex, then why wouldn't a ghost be able to masturbate? Why wouldn't you have, especially, you know, like you have like a young dude, right? He has a high sex drive, and his soul is doomed to walk around this high school forever, or at least until the batteries run out, 100, 150 years, whatever it is. He's going to jack off all the time. Because that's what teenagers do. That's what young men do. He's going to constantly masturbate. Then you got to start wondering, what is he looking at as he's staring out that window? Unless the ghost specifically sexualizes themselves, we neuter ghosts. We completely neuter them. And if a ghost can have sex with a human, then we would assume a ghost has a sex drive. And if that sex drive, if those needs are not met, then they will masturbate. Maybe this is how you get those sex fiend ghosts. But this is why it's kind of disturbing as well, is that, let's say this high school, and you can find stories like this all over America, these haunted high schools. You have two people in their sexual prime die. Well, women hit their sexual prime when they're 40. But you know what I mean? Like, this young woman will never be more fertile than she is at 18 years old. Let's keep it legal. They're both 18-year-old when they die. They're both legal ghosts. Having sex with each other, they never really hung out. They absolutely didn't hang out in school. They died 30 years apart. And having someone to share this solitude with, this spiritual solitude with, would be a gift. It's the difference between being trapped in a mine all by yourself with just a flashlight and a pack of gum versus being stuck in a mine with a couple other people. The oxygen runs out quicker, but you won't be alone. And there could be this sense of hope, this sense of togetherness. They could come together. They could meet. They could keep each other company. But I mean, if you, the creep level just goes out of the roof on this one, and I'm not just saying like because it's two ghosts banging in the band room. I'm thinking like you have this guy who dies, student who dies, 18 years old. 30 years later, this 18-year-old girl dies in a car accident. And again, these are very generic examples that I'm using. Now their ghosts are in the school. What if one of them doesn't want to be with the other person? What if one of them is like, he's like, dude, I've been a ghost for 30 years. Don't worry, I got this down. Ma'am, you're pretty and all. She's so horribly disfigured. Her ghost form hasn't coalesced into the beautiful angelic vision that people will someday see. She's still like, blood shooting out of her face. He's like, yeah, you know, you're cute and all, but I think I'm good. I'm doing this whole monastery thing. It involves lots of masturbation, but it's working for me. And what if she won't take no for an answer? Like, he can't really go anywhere. He's haunting a building. She's haunting the building. There would be a power differential there because we see power levels in ghosts. Could a ghost, if two ghosts can have sex with each other, can a ghost rape another ghost? I mean, these are all very, very horrible questions to ask. And you may say, Jason, then don't ask them. But it's not, I mean, I don't know if I'll ever be able to do a presentation like this at the Port Gamble Ghost Conference. But, yeah, if ghosts can have sex with each other, we know ghosts can have sex with humans, or we believe that based on accounts. That means that ghosts have a sex drive. If ghosts have a sex drive, then they probably masturbate. And if ghosts have a sex drive, they probably have sex with each other. But what happens when one of the ghosts does not want to be in this situation? What if one of these ghosts says, no, I'm good, I don't want to have sex with you? But you can't leave. Like, you're in this school for the next 100 years. As long as your batteries remain charged, as long as you're still pulling off of whatever source allows ghosts to exist, you're trapped. It's interesting because, again, think about that initial question. We're about to move on to the next one, but the question, can ghosts have sex with each other? It's kind of funny when you think about it, but once you actually think about it, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and then we get to that. So, I don't know. It's funny, the way that this show works is that sometimes when we talk about stuff like this, either you, I know a lot of you guys send me stories, I really appreciate that. Either you or I will come across a story that kind of will validate this in one way or the other. It would make sense. Humans are highly sexual. Our souls would be too. Our souls, ghosts do stuff that they don't biologically need to do. You could say, well, they don't have a sex drive. They don't have any sex hormones going through them. Yeah, they don't need clothes either, but they appear wearing clothes. So it's just bizarre. Mokushi, I'm going to go ahead and toss you the keys to the world famous Carpenter Copter. I'll explain why he sounds so exhausted in a second. Mokushi, catch the keys to the Carpenter Copter. We are leaving behind this haunted high school. We hope that these people are not total sex pests. We hope that they are, if they are engaged in any lovemaking, that it is consensual, but it's just horrifying to think about either way. Mokushi, fly us out of this high school. Take us all the way out to Tennessee. Man, the reason why I'm so exhausted, I don't know why this episode is so hard to record. It could be because I have no notes, right? It could be because I have no structure. I don't know why I thought Jason Thinkins worked the first time, I think, if I remember. And then I didn't do it for 2 years. I don't know why I decided on the day the episode is supposed to come out. I should be editing this by now. I'm still recording this. I just did a half-hour segment about Boeing, right? All the Boeing suicides and how that's connected to these energy draining, glowing beings from Wales that I covered in a recent episode, and how that's connected to Travis Kelce. You're like, Jason, whatever you're going to talk about in Tennessee, that sounds more interesting. I can give it one more try. I don't have another half hour in me. If you guys really want to hear about... Here's my theory. Jason Thinkins, this will be the last one we ever do. Well, I really want to get to this Tennessee story, but let me just throw all this together. Okay. Sometimes when you cover stories on this podcast, especially stories no one else is talking about, I get concerned that they're too true. When I'm talking about the Illuminati or the Black-Eyed Club or the Black Cube of Saturn, anything like that, right? That stuff's so heavily trafficked in the conspiracy theory world, and I see it all over the place. YouTube videos, I see articles written about it, some of it's in the mainstream. I don't worry about it. I don't worry about covering chemtrails. I don't worry about covering this stuff. Because if there was any truth behind it, you would never see any proof of it. Now, there are conspiracy theories that I will not talk about on this show. Because I know they're 100% true. And I know they're very dangerous to talk about. It's not the ones you're thinking of either. It's nothing to do with the Jewish. It's nothing to do with the Jews. There's nothing to do with Jewish people or Israel or anything like that. In my life of doing conspiracy theory research, I have stumbled across things that are true. Or seem to be so true that you can find zero information about them. These are things that I've learned over the years and things that I will not repeat, right? If there's anyone who's like, oh, I know what he's talking about, let's not shoot him. He just told us he would never. I haven't even told my best friends some of the stuff that I've come across. And it's not like Pizzagate. It's nothing super creepy. It's just like that. Here's the thing. Maybe it's not true, but because you can find nothing on it, not a book, not an article, not a video, not a website, nothing, it makes you think maybe there's something behind that. That was the whole thing about the Conformers. We've talked about the Conformers on this show before a couple times. I'll put it in the show notes. Supposedly, it's the only alien race out there. Real quick overview of the Conformers. It's the only alien race out there. They're silica-based. They look like giant piles of rock. And when they talk, it sounds like pebbles falling in a tin bucket. They're extremely violent and, if I remember correctly, highly religious. Now, most of the information we have from the Conformers is from a guy named Clay Pickering, and I believe his brother as well. But this information that he puts out there, it's sad. You go, well, okay, there's one story, and we have all these other stories about aliens over the past 60 years, and even going farther back than that, ancient aliens, if you're into that. Clearly, this guy and his brother is one story. It's just one story. We have all this other alien stuff. I think they built the Greys as robots. It's been a while since I've looked into the Conformers. But here's the thing. Finding stuff on the Conformers is very, very difficult. Like, suspiciously difficult. I heard about him on Mysterious Universe years ago. It's been more than a decade at this point that Mysterious Universe covered him. And then I looked into him and I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy. And then when I started my podcast, I went to go look for him again and I couldn't find anything on him. The stuff that I did find, some of the articles were getting removed as I was doing my research. So it makes you think, wow, maybe I'm onto something. So when I record episodes like that, I'm like, what if I'm actually getting too close to the truth? What if I'm getting to the point where I accidentally drown in my bathtub? I'll tell you this, guys, right now. I never take a bath. I do shower. I'm not a greasy, oily man. But I don't take a bath. If you ever find me dead in my bathtub from a drug overdose, that's not me. I mean, it's me. It's my bloated corpse in there, but it's the feds. Someone came after me. The Conformers. You find these two rock-shaped bruises on my forearms as they held me down. So I talked about that. And then I started talking about Boeing, the Boeing thing that's allegedly going on legally. I have to say that as the plane that you're in right now is crumbling around you. You're listening to this podcast. You're like, Boeing has had a problem with their planes falling apart, which is kind of the worst thing a plane can do. If you're driving in your car and the engine stalls or your door falls off or whatever, you're like, I'm going to walk over to AutoZone and Maybe they'll have a cardboard box. There's nothing I can buy there that will give me a new door, but maybe they'll have a cardboard box in the back I can make a new door. A plane falling out of the sky, just stuff falling off of it. People's luggage is getting sucked out through holes in the wings. It's actually kind of funny. As long as I'm not on the plane, it's hilarious. Nobody's died. But a couple of whistleblowers have come out from Boeing to say, hey, I don't know if you guys, he's giving a press conference, airplane pieces are falling behind him. He's like, yeah. See all that stuff? Yeah, that's what's going on at Boeing. Their planes are falling apart. I don't know how much of a whistleblower you need for that. CNN's covering it. But these people are coming out from Boeing and kind of talking about what was going on inside the company. And one of them has shot himself and is dead. And that happened a couple months ago, if I remember correctly. I don't have notes. That's the reason why I spent 30 minutes recording a segment that I can't use. But recently, like this past week, another Boeing whistleblower died of a fast-acting MRSA. Isn't that like staph? He got this, it was like a routine procedure, and he got this horrible infection, and he died very quickly. So now people are like, obviously when a whistleblower commits suicide, this is very suspicious. But now that two whistleblowers have died in uniquely bizarre ways, it reminds us of the Marconi system suicides. We covered that episode a long time ago. A lot of you guys really love that episode. That is often talked about as being one of your favorite eps. It was a company that, if I remember correctly, it's been a while, but defense contractor company. And then something happened, and then all of a sudden, like 47 people over the course of a couple of years died in increasingly bizarre ways. Now, when I covered the Marconi system suicides, I remember I had that same thing. It was pretty well covered, but it had been so long, and I started thinking, what if I'm onto something with this? But I go, well, I think I'll be fine, because a bunch of people have covered this. When you're looking at the Boeing thing, I'm sure people will start taking a really close look into this, closer look than I will, but, if they have any sort of resources and they get a bee in their bonnet, they may be trying to investigate Boeing as an independent journalist, and they start talking to other whistleblowers. They get close to the truth, and the next thing you know, some reporter from Boise, Idaho is found dead in their bathtub because they were drinking wine and took too many sleeping pills. Accidental death. Which probably wouldn't even make the news if that reporter wasn't connected to trying to uncover stuff on Boeing. If it was just a reporter who died drinking too much wine one night, it would make the news there. Obviously, they're like, we have less articles today. One of our reporters died. Sometimes when you're covering conspiracy theories, you have to wonder, how close am I to the truth? All that leads up to this. That leads up to the glowing people and Travis Kelce. You're like, so you decide, am I too close to the truth? Did I fly too close to the sun? Remember, I don't take a bath. Either way, I do not take a bath. I shower. And I also don't slip in the shower. And I'm not suicidal. The other day we were talking about this huge revival in Wales. I really, really like that story. It's a lot of fun to record. We were talking about this huge religious revival at the beginning of the 1900s in Wales, and all these Christians are marching on the street, harassing Catholics, hitting each other with sledgehammers. A good time was had by all. But one of the things in that story, he's probably the original paranormal researcher, Charles Fort. He was documenting all this. He was alive back then. People hitting each other with sledgehammers were suffering no damage. It was this weird miracle, this weird feat of strength. UFOs were observed flying over the sky. There was a spate of cattle mutilations in mainland Europe at the same time. All this weird stuff was going on. One of the things he pointed out, in Wales, where the revival started, there was a sighting or multiple sightings of these luminous beings that seemed to be feeding off the energy of the revivalists. They were producing so much love. They were producing so much passion for Christ. Not the movie. Not the movie, because that movie's not going to make you feel good, but they loved Jesus so much that these luminous beings seemed to be feeding off of these positive emotions. Close-eared listeners of Dead Rabbit Radio will probably remember, while I was telling that story, I said, hey, I just came up with an idea, and I kind of jotted it down. Here's my idea. This is what it has to do with Travis Kelce. Major League Sports can be rigged. People hate it when I say that, but it's true. There is no law that prevents the NFL from rigging football games. Zero. In fact, when a group of football fans tried to sue the NFL and the Patriots because of they were cheating, the Patriots had deflated the ball or something like that. It's just all flat. They're throwing it like frisbee. Everyone's like, "What? How do you do that?" Yeah, that's against the rules. A bunch of football fans try to have a class action lawsuit against the NFL and the Patriots, saying, the New England Patriots, saying, "Hey, we got ripped off. We paid for a fair football game, and the games weren't fair. They were rigged." And it's in the ruling. The judge says, "You did not pay for a fair football game. You paid for a football game, which you got." And it says in that NFL is classified as sports entertainment, which is the same classification as WWE. There is no legal obligation at all that the NFL has to provide you fair football games. They can decide way in advance what teams are going to win. I don't think they do it on a minute level, trying to figure out the score, because the more fingers you got in there, the more you have to have actual human fingers in there, and it can kind of collapse any good conspiracy theory. But you could just say, listen, we're going to have the Kansas City Chiefs back again, and they're going to play the 49ers. We're going to have this whole dynasty versus dynasty thing. We're going to get these two teams. And then everything, the players don't know. I think most people don't know who work for these organizations. You'd have to have some refs in on it, but not on a huge level. But you make this determination. I remember back when I was in Sacramento Kings fans, they 100% believe this conspiracy theory, because the Kings could never make it to the championships. Even though they're like, the Kings are the best, as they have all these Sacramento King tattoos. They wear nothing but Sacramento Kings clothes. They named their first son King. They'd say the team's so good, we'll never make the championships. And I dabbled in watching basketball back then. Just looking for something fun, right? I like the theory of sports, but I don't have time to really watch them. And I remember talking to my buddy Josh, and I go, well, why do you think that there is a conspiracy against the Kings, the Sacramento Kings directly? And Josh, probably shouldn't say his name. He might end up in a bathtub. Josh had an interesting point. He goes, listen, the Kings, they're a great team. This was back, because I know people are going to argue, this would have been back in the early 2000s when you had a bunch of players, the big giant Russian guy and the mayor. He would eventually become mayor. Anyways, you had all these players. I don't know. I don't follow basketball, but anyways, the point is, he goes, here's the thing, Jason. He goes, the reason why you have the LA Lakers and the Chicago Bulls and all that stuff, he goes, they're always making the playoffs. You always have these teams. He goes, because they have huge fan bases. So when they make it to the championship, you're going to get way more viewers and way more merchandise money from LA and Chicago than you would from Sacramento. He goes, just strictly by the numbers. If you just looked at the numbers of the amount of fans, there are, even though Sacramento Kings fans are absolutely rabid, he goes, there's less of them. And the rest of the country, you have people who are already Chicago Bulls fans who've never been to Chicago. You have fans of the LA Lakers who've never been to LA. So who cares about Sacramento? He didn't say that. He would have been beat up by the 10 fans around him, the 10 Kings fans around him. But he goes, that's why. He goes, the reason why they'll never make the they'd always make the playoffs and they'd always lose, that was a bad call by the ref. That was a bad call by the ref. You'd hear 1,000 times that week. But I thought about it, obviously, when he said that. I go, well, that would make sense. And then, we've covered stories about the NFL, about sports kind of rigging the game before. For some reason, it keeps popping up on this podcast. And it's true. They do not guarantee you a fair game. They 100% can say at the beginning of the season, and they can make modifications. They can say, well, we're going to let the Chicago Bulls win this one. I mean, obviously, winning 2 games, you could go, well, they won the 3rd game, like Kansas City Chiefs. I think there's 3-peat They won the third game because they were just so good. They got better over the last 2 seasons. However, selling shirts that say Kansas City Chiefs, three-peat, never beaten, whatever, everybody's going to buy a new copy of that shirt. They get a new shirt that says three. The 49ers should have won that game, by the way. I don't follow sports that much, but I did watch that game. I listened to it on the radio. But here's my point. Here's what I'm getting at. What if the NFL is in league with these luminous beings? And before you laugh too late, let me finish my thought, because I'm about to blow your mind. You have these luminous beings that do exist among us, and they feed off of our positive emotions. We've heard about archons, we've heard about Loosh, we've heard about these entities that like to inflict pain and distress like a solar plexus clown glider. I'll put all these episodes in the show notes if this is your first time listening to an episode. They feed off negativity. It would make sense there would be an entity that would feed off of positivity. And feed off this joy in our hearts. Whether that joy is for Christ at some revival in the 1900s or for Travis Kelce. What position does he play? I don't even know. Water boy. Running around the football field and everyone's cheering and clapping, and then Taylor Swift is there, so you have a whole other fan base who are watching the game just to catch a glimpse of her. And it's building up all this positive emotion. What if because really, listen, religion, I know not everyone's into religion. And I think nowadays it's not cool to be in religion. It's been kind of shifting that way for about 20, 30 years in America. It's not cool. So a lot of people even keep that hidden from their lives, but they'll gladly proclaim their love of a sports team. And I'm not saying that that's bad or that's NPC behavior or anything like that. What I'm saying is that if you had a entity, if you had a life form that leached off the positive feelings of humans, and they are less of a church-going population now than they used to be, the entity can either starve and die, or it can create new sources of food. And these entities want to feed off of it in its rawest form. And so it knows. These entities go, listen, man, Kansas City, we don't know what it is about this place, but these people give off some good energy. They're all laying back, they're patting their bellies. Oh, man, this is good stuff. So we're going to keep riding in this train. And then one of these illuminated, I almost gave it away. One of these luminous beings shows up, and they're like, hey, dude, what if we peanut butter and jelly this stuff? Like, I've been hanging out at these concerts. That'd be another huge generator of energy for these entities, right? Can you imagine one of these entities, one of these luminous forms at an Olivia Rodrigo concert? It's like you think it's just a dancer on stage. He's like, I hunger, I grow. It's like lighting the place up. You have these luminous, and it's funny, like, Jason, if your theory's true, then shouldn't we see them? They're like, and look at the fan cam, the two interdimensional phantasms that feed off our love. They're all dancing. They look at each other. They start kissing. You're like, if this is true, if your theory's true, how come we're not seeing them all the time? Well, okay, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that. I'll be honest with you. But I still got a humdinger for you. We're not going to be able to get to that last story. I apologize. But, you have these luminous beings saying, dude, let's do this. Like, we know that they're going to cheer most for this. We know that this is what the people want, and we just want to feed off that positive energy, feeding off of our joy. And even, like, you'd have them situated all over the place because, the people who were hanging on by hope that the 49ers could actually pull it through. Didn't they lose in overtime? But anyways, all of that, right? Every time a play's right, they could just feed off of that beautiful, beautiful love energy. And I can't really think of many things that generate that level of joy outside of entertainment. Football, sports, right? Movies, music, musical concerts, and things like that. You just feed off of that. And they may dictate to the league who is going to win because they can see, well, we believe that this fan base is going to be more passionate about the win. If it comes down to like the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Ohio Lake Boys, whatever, no one's going to watch that game. Not only is no one going to watch the game, so now we have less money for the NFL. Even though, what if those were the two best teams that time, if they existed? No one was going to watch it. They'd have to interfere. And especially if there's some sort of interdimensional entity being like, oh, I'm starving. Who are these losers? Give us real teams. Give us superstars. This is what I'm getting at. I'm going to wrap it all up like this. What if our media, all of it, movies, television, sports, which a lot of time is left out of these conspiracy theories or they're in their separate bucket, but all this media is specifically created to bring us some form of joy. Even it's like watching a horror movie. You feel like all the adrenaline watching it. It still makes you feel good in a weird way. What if all of our media, everything that we consume, is angled towards bringing us joy? And what if there is a group that controls all of it? A group that has its fingers in everything that brings us comfort, everything that makes us feel alive, makes us feel love. If not towards our fellow man, towards the media we're consuming. We're passionate about it. And this group not only controls the media, not only controls all of these things that we consume, but also has to maintain that power, controls the government as well. Not that the government brings anybody joy, but it does give you a little bit of counterbalance, right? The government can do things that scare you, but then you can turn back to your favorite television show that comforts you once more. You can kind of play this back and forth. What if there's a single group that controls everything we love, controls the government, controls the newspapers? Could be global. Could want to be global. It could be specific to a couple different regions, and would like to expand its power, but can't for whatever reason. You have this group that controls all of those things. This group are these luminous beings. One of, if not the original paranormal researcher, documented the existence of these luminous beings at this revival, feeding off the energy. It's almost like it was so powerful they couldn't not take form. They had to appear as themselves, what they really look like, because they were so overloaded from all of this just raw love. Most of the time they can stay hidden from us. We see their hands because we see their works, but we don't truly know who crafted them. We just see this and go, wow, I love this. And we don't understand, movie director, video game director, whatever was all setting this up, but at the end of the chain, there was one of these luminous beings, these creatures that feed off of our love. And they control everything because we are their food source. They keep us comfortable because we provide them with sustenance, but they also have to keep us a little scared. So when we are in times of need, we turn back and we consume so they can consume. This race of luminous entities that controls us. They are glowing. They are illuminated. They are the Illuminati. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal conspiracy and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today. Have a